Hello, Sam's fans. So we are back this week with Facebook Live. Like every Wednesday about this time. Sometimes it's at noon, sometimes it's at 3. But we are here to talk about music and art therapy, to talk about Sam's fans and different things. So every week we have this. So make sure you tune in to see what we're talking about. Today, Melissa, how do you say your last name? Ayotte?
Ayotte.
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 Melissa.
The family saying is, "It's not a boat, it's a yacht."
Okay,
That's
gotcha.
the guide
Yeah,
that we give people on how to pronounce it. But we answer to
awesome.
whatever. It's a tough one.
Right, awesome. Well, thank you for being here with us today. So, Melissa is an art therapist, and this is actually our first broadcast on art therapy. So, I'm excited. I don't really know much about it, so I'm looking forward to learning more about it and talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Definitely. So, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself first, kind of what you do, where you studied, and all that?
Sure. Well, let's see. So I've for me personally, art has been a part of my life from the time I could hold crayons. My parents we always had art supplies in the household. And so I it's hard to say when my training first began, because
Mm.
as a sort of a self-balancing tool to regulate my own sensitivities as a child, art was my go-to. And so needless to say, that sort of began a series of questioning about what's happening here. Like, I feel better when I do this, and actually there's even more meaning in the things that I make than what I realize is there. And like, how does this happen? And and also just feeling very much called to be in service, to help others. And I feel like art therapy, when I first learned about it, was sort of the union of my love of people and wanting to be in service, and my love of art. And so I just feel very blessed that I was able to find studies that I could that kind of led me along in my path. The work that I do currently is primarily with children. I do serve adolescents and adults as well. But I find that the wellness center that I'm in is an integrative wellness center for children. And, during my graduate studies, I kind of found that I had just sort of a special connection with kids with autism through art. And it wasn't something that I anticipated, but when I spoke to my art therapy mentor, sorry, I'm holding my phone up with my hand and my hand's getting
Mhm.
tired, so I'll have to switch back and forth.
Right.
But
Yeah.
when I talked to the person who was my art therapy supervisor at the time, I just thought she was amazing at everything. And we had a moment where we were just talking about some things, and she pointed out that it seemed like I had a very special connection with the kids who have autism. And I said, yeah, they're like, my favorite. And she said, oh, and I could kind of see by her face that she thought that was kind of neat. And that was a very encouraging thing for me. And I started looking into art therapy for kids with autism, and there weren't any resources in the area at the time. So that sort of got me, kind of thinking about that. And then so I found this wellness center, the Flourish Center in Columbus, Ohio, that is an integrative wellness center for children. And there are a lot of different services that are offered here, and they were totally on board with a collaboration. And so I have my own practice, Painted Path Art Therapy, that exists in the wellness center space. And so it's a really wonderful place where all the people that are here because we love serving children. We want to help them gain the tools that they need to grow and develop and be the best that they can be. And art therapy fits really well in with their mission. So,
Definitely. So that's pretty awesome. I love that you have had art all throughout your life and now you're able to use it to help all these people. I think that's pretty awesome.
yeah, thank you.
Now, can we take a step back and talk about maybe what is art therapy? Maybe some people don't know the difference between just doing art and drawing and actual art therapy.
Yeah, the short explanation for that, I'll try to keep it brief and succinct, and we can always point people to the blog that I wrote for Sam's fans that describes things more in detail. But we all, many of us who have created art, recognize, or even colored pictures and just engaged in some kind of creative activity, you feel a sense of time slowing down. You feel your body relax. Some people feel that their thoughts kind of slow down, or even, they become less aware of their thoughts at that time, and it's very calming for them. And so, because of that, there've been a lot of people who just think of art, the act of doing art, as therapy. And so it is true that it is therapeutic and has a lot of wonderful effects on the body and the brain and everything. But art therapy is different than just doing art on your own. Um, Art therapy is working with an art therapist that you've developed a relationship with, where there's trust there, and there's also an awareness on the part of the art therapist um, on what your goals are, what your strengths are, and what your challenges are. And they are able, through their training, to strategically address or help you achieve those goals using different art mediums. And that's the piece that's just very different. It's definitely not randomly doing arts and crafts,
Mm,
or just for the entertainment value or the recreational purpose of it. It is, there are theories in art therapy education about how different medium can access different parts of the psyche, and it's about helping clients gain new tools, new self-awareness that will help them move forward, and even sometimes finding meaning through their challenges that's going to help them move through a difficult time in their lives to enhance their overall well-being and quality of life.
definitely. Yeah, I love that. And I definitely see a lot of parallels with music therapy, in which, music by itself can be therapeutic, but when you're working with a music therapist, it's the same thing what you're talking about, but we're different. We're using different mediums. So
Yeah,
I really like
one
that.
of my favorite groups that I ever had the opportunity to do was with a music therapist at an
Oh,
inpatient facility in Columbus, and it
mhm.
was so fun. Yeah, we had a great
Yeah,
time with that.
that's awesome. Now, so you already talked about, some populations that benefit from music, from art therapy. So you talked about people with Down syndrome, but maybe can we go a little bit more in depth about the populations that art therapy usually serves?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that makes it maybe even a little bit more unclear to people, because you find art therapists in lots of different spaces and working with a lot of different populations. So, one person's understanding or experience of with art therapy could be very different from another person's experience. So I can speak to my own practice. I do work with cancer survivors, and that those are adult groups. I do work with um, children, like I said, who have learning disabilities, adults with depression, children with anxiety, and PTSD. There's a lot of research that's been done with on the effectiveness of art therapy with individuals who have, veterans, namely, who are experiencing PTSD, and yeah, so, and addictions, you'll find art therapists in addictions programs. um, I'm trying to think who I'm leaving out, because there are literally countless places where you can find art therapists. And another one that a lot of people don't think about or recognize are the art therapists with the open art studios, or the art therapy programs that are very community based,
Hmm.
where they're making their contributions, maybe not working with a specific mental health or behavioral health need, but out there in the communities, giving voice to people just by putting art supplies in their hands, and giving them the
Right.
opportunities to create.
Yeah, definitely. And so we definitely recognize all these populations, and it's the same thing with music therapy, that for us at Sam's Fans, just because we focus on music and art therapy specifically at perhaps children's hospitals or kids with serious illnesses, that does not mean that that's the only place in which you can find arts and music therapy. There's like definitely a lot of populations who really benefit a lot from these two therapies.
Yes, absolutely.
That's great. Now, do you have this other question? Do you think that there are some people that are perhaps more prone, or that because of their personality, they benefit more because they like doing art and they like uh, working with their hands and that sort of thing? Or do you think it's sort of not really dependent on that much?
Um, That's a really good question, because I've definitely had, people who will come to me or bring their children because they identify either as, having an affinity towards creating visual arts, or their child really seems to love art. But that is not necessary. Um, the art processes that I can facilitate for clients and for groups are very accessible to anyone. And one of the great things about art therapy is just meeting people where they are and teaching them that they how to tap into that part of themselves if they don't have an awareness that it's there, just through some simple interactions and some facilitation of using the art materials in very
Mhm.
exploratory kind of a way. They can begin to connect with that part of themselves that maybe, I remember there was a woman in a group, a cancer survivor group, who was, maybe in her 70s. And I had the group doing some things that were down on the floor, and she was able to do this. And she just laughed at one point spontaneously in the middle of
Mhm.
the group. And she said, I haven't done this since I was 5. I think it
Mhm.
was kindergarten. And so sometimes people just forget that part of them is
Mhm.
there. And, and so yeah, it's not necessary that you love art, that you even identify as an artist, that you have
Mhm.
any experience. Um, and oftentimes, what will bring people is curiosity. And maybe they've tried some other things that maybe haven't worked. And so they're looking for something else, something new, something different. And I find probably the best uh, I want to make sure that I'm saying this accurately, but I think maybe the best deciding factor, if you're trying to decide if art therapy is for you, is considering the need or maybe the difficulty that arises in talking about emotional content, because art therapy helps to bypass that and allows you to work with something other than words. And of course, the words can sometimes come after you've organized, your emotions, so to speak, through whatever you've created. And that's part of where the relationship with the art therapist really comes into play too, is helping with um, accessing the language through that process. But that's oftentimes what I think uh, makes people maybe seek out something so different, is because they're experiencing a challenge where the words don't seem to come,
Mhm.
or where they've gone through the narrative or the languaging around a situation or a challenge and it doesn't seem to be finished. And so art therapy can be wonderful for just kind of opening up a whole new pathway of discovery.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I think that's a great thing to do, and to a great perspective on how the creative therapies work. Now, perhaps just briefly, could you also talk a little bit about what the art therapy education looks like?
Sure. So, an art therapist, in order to become registered and board certified, we have a national organization that credentials us. State by state, rules and regulations differ, but across the board, everybody adheres to, on some level, our national standards. And it requires that we have a master's degree in art therapy, um, and that training involves studies in development, psychology, counseling theory and practice, art therapy theory and practice, as well as studio art. For obviously we have to be very knowledgeable about art techniques and different art methods, and spirituality, ethics, cultural sensitivities. Um, I'm trying to think of everything. So it's very it's much more involved than what people realize, because we are, we ethically, in order to practice, we definitely have to have an understanding about what's really going on here, because there's something more to what we do, obviously, than just arts and crafts. And we're also working with some of the most vulnerable people in our society. When people seek out support, often that's a very big step for them. And it's generally because they've already tried a whole lot of things themselves, and they haven't they haven't found the answer for them. And so the training is pretty in depth. As part of that, we also have to have practicum experience, and then we also have to have clinical internship. And then, after we've completed all of that, and we get our master's degree, we have supervision, 1,000 hours of supervision, clinical supervision, postgraduate, before we can even apply to become a registered art therapist, and before we can even sit for our board exam.
Wow.
And so there's a lot involved, a lot of steps,
Mhm.
but I'm glad that you asked that question, because it's
Right.
something that I think a lot of people don't realize
Mm.
about art therapists and how they get to do what they do.
Yeah, definitely. It is not just like, oh, deciding I like art, I'm gonna be an art therapist, and that's it. There's a lot of training
Right.
that goes along that. That's great.
Definitely.
I like that. Now, just so that the people watching know, so Melissa, um, I met her through Facebook. I was looking for some art therapists in Columbus, and she's actually writing blog posts for our webpage. They've had a great response. A lot of people are reading them and finding them interesting and useful. So definitely, if you have the chance, go to our website and to our blog, and you can find the post that Melissa has written. She wrote about what is art therapy. She wrote one that is really cool about some arts games that if you're a parent, you might want to read that. Um, which one? What else do you write about? ADHD, right?
ADHD, and then I'm working on one that should be ready this week, about art therapy with autism.
Right, definitely. So definitely check out that content. And I also want to take just a couple minutes to mention that for some fans, I feel sometimes we focus a little bit more on music therapy, but definitely art therapy is also something that we support wholeheartedly. And in our partner hospitals, um, most of the therapists that we fund are music therapists. But for example, at Cincinnati Children's, we fund an art therapist. She goes to the hospital once a week, and then she works with kids. Then um, there, we also fund some art programs at camps for children with serious illnesses, and we're always buying a ton of art supplies for all the hospitals because all of them, well, Dayton doesn't have an art therapist, but the other three do have art therapy programs. So maybe, who knows, maybe art therapy at Dayton is the next step or something like
That
that.
sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
I would love to help champion that. One of my goals when I graduated from the graduate program was to try to help create more jobs for art therapists because,
Hmm.
obviously I'm very passionate. I believe in what I do, and just to be able to partner with you guys who are, you're on the same page, with
Right.
me about that. I think that would be a wonderful thing.
Definitely, yes. So we'll keep talking about a lot of possibilities and things we can do to bring more art therapy to Columbus, to Cincinnati, Dayton, Akron, to all of Ohio, and then who knows, maybe the whole United States. So we'll definitely keep working on that. Um, I was also interested in maybe if you can tell us one story, like an impact story that you can think of right now.
Okay. In terms of like maybe a
Or
client or
yeah,
person
maybe a client.
client. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, Let me think about this. Gosh, I really truly feel so blessed and so honored to bear witness to so many people's
Hmm.
journeys. And it's hard to pick out just one.
Right.
Uh, but and with careful consideration to the details of
Right.
therapy, I don't want to reveal too much information. But
Definitely.
I will say, because that's confidential kind of stuff,
Hmm.
and somebody watching this may not necessarily want that information out there. But I
Right.
will say that about one of the most profound experiences. I mean, every day I have instances where I'm like, this feels like magic. Even though I have the
Hmm.
training and I know why it works, it's
Hmm.
still so amazing to witness things. And this is an example. There was a child who came to me with a learning disability um, that made accessing language, expressive language, difficult for her. And through the assessment process, um, she kind of took it to a whole different direction and kind of deviated from the directive.
Hmm.
And my instincts told me that the art was taking her where she needed to go. And the content of what came up in one of the things that I often will do in an assessment is I'll ask individuals to create a three-dimensional piece of artwork with clay and just some other things that I offer to get an idea of their comfort level and their visual spatial processing, asking them to do something three-dimensional and not only sticking to
Hmm.
two-dimensional. Well, in that working with clay, the content of what came out, she spent so much time on and actually didn't finish that for many weeks. And I
Hmm.
allowed that to unfold, even though it was very different from the way that I normally do the assessment process. And so I'm so glad that I did, because at one point I discussed with the mom that I had some hunches that there seemed to be some indicators for a traumatic experience in a relationship here between the content of what was coming up. And the mom was like really floored
Hmm.
because something had happened to it. The child, it was an accident, a household accident that had happened when the child was young. Um, that obviously was still coming up for her,
Hmm.
and through that, then it kind of directed precisely where the therapy needed to go, and then was able to work with the family, and eventually there was a level of comfort where this child was able to access language a little bit easier for herself. And it's just amazing. Sometimes you don't really know how adverse experiences, how they're stored in the brain, how they will interfere with other learning processes, and even social interactions and stuff in the future. And then once that can be alleviated, it's just amazing to see how that individual can experience like a transformation,
Yeah.
so
Awesome. That's really intense story, and I think that's great, and that's the power of art therapy. So thank you so much for sharing.
yeah, thank you.
Definitely. And just real quick, we've had some people commented, and this is Nikki's mom. So I just wanted to share, because there's definitely sometimes, like we talked, a misunderstanding of what training is required of art therapists and music therapists. So
Yeah.
it's good that we shared that.
Well, hi, Patty. Thank you.
Yeah. And other than that, there are no questions in our comments. And I think this has been a really fruitful conversation talking about what art therapy is, who can benefit from it, and all the training that is required. Uh, just one last comment that somebody just said something. I want to show it to you. It says, George says that it's great to see Melissa using her talents in education, helping people through art therapy.
Oh, thank you, George. Appreciate that. Yeah, it
Yeah.
definitely feels a little bit, I think it just feels like seeing things come full circle. Sometimes, when you're young and you're starting out,
Mhm.
you have to make some decisions about what you want to do with your life and so forth. And so I have had the opportunity to see things that I learned, like art being so significant to me, and then getting an opportunity to have a place to put that contributes something positive and meaningful feels very special for sure.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us today for this Facebook Live broadcast. And to all our viewers, remember every Wednesday about this time, we'll let you know, but you can tune in and listen to us talking about music and art therapy. Do you have any last words, Melissa?
No, I just would like to encourage anybody who would like to know more that there are those blogs that I've written that are available. And if you have any other questions, you can always send me a message on Painted Path, my Painted Path Art Therapy Facebook page. And you can like the page too, please.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So that's linked to the description as well as Melissa's profile. So we can definitely keep that communication going. Awesome.
Well, thank you
Well,
so
thank
much,
you.
Sam.
Yeah. All right. Then till next time.
All right. Take care.